Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're joining us today in today's live lecture coming to you from Nkola Mahadum Wisdom University. Today's date in Igbo lunar calendar is Afo Market Day. And today's date in the Roman Catholic calendar is 7/26/2025. And remember, at Nkola Mahadum, we always advise you to use your naturally given common sense to be making decisions. Do not base your decisions on whatever you are told by anybody. And we also set up to make sure that we give you the information that will help you to understand the truth and save yourself from continuous misinformation, miseducation, and that puts you into mental slavery. We also always advise you to join us, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and other social media platforms, because we package our lectures from Igbo man, from Biafran and African perspectives, how you should be seeing things. You should be seeing things from how it concerns you, not how it concerns other people. And also, we want to make sure that the Igbo man, the Biafrans, and African understand what is going on across the world. When you understand how decisions being made outside the borders, outside our borders, in faraway Europe and other parts of the world are affecting you, then you know how to adjust. You know how to navigate in order to live your life without much interference. And in today's lecture, we want to use the interview done by Professor Glenn Dinson with Jeffrey Sachs as basis for our lecture today. This interview encompasses, touch so many things, and that is why it is very important that we use it today to deliver our lecture to you. And the title of our lecture today is that the Western Europeans, when we say Western Europeans, it includes United States, Canada, Britain, France, Portugal, Australia, Spain, all and others that have Western European origin. They are all Western European, including those in even New Zealand, and so on and so forth. So those countries are now falling. They are now losing their grip, while countries and continents like Africa, South America, China, Russia, other continents are rising. As the Western Europeans are falling, so do others rise. And that is why it is very important that you listen to this lecture. And we are asking you to please, because now we are live. We are live on YouTube, we are live on Facebook, and we are live on Twitter. Join us and enjoy this lecture. So let's start immediately on this lecture. And thank you for joining us today.
Today by Jeffrey Sachs to discuss the redefinition of America First and also the future of BRICS. So welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Glenn.
So the economic dominance of the Western world has been declining for many years, and it has appeared to have already come to an end, which meant that the U.S. could embrace two different paths. The first being the U.S. scaling back its empire and I guess facilitating a multipolar system in which the U.S. would be one, if not the first among equals. This appeared to be a possibility under the Trump's America First platform. The other option would be for the United States to fight all the other poles of power to restore hegemony. However, then a multipolar system would likely be developed in opposition to the United States. It appears that Trump has, if it was not always intended to, shifted to the second, as he's now very much making the Russia war his own war, of course, attacking Iran, and now also encouraging allies to prepare for war, or at least commit to war with China. What do you see having happened to America First? Was it always destined to be a failure, or was it always a deception? How are you interpreting this?
Well, first, let me say, just to clarify one major point. The West is not in decline. The rest of the world is catching up. So from a historical point of view, modern economic development, meaning the Industrial Revolution, the industrial age of the 19th century, then the age of electricity, the age of the automobile, now the age of information and the digital age, was led initially by the North Atlantic, what we call the West. Britain was the first industrialized country. Britain was the place where the steam engine created industrialization. Now, it was in the 19th century when the gap between the West, so-called, and the rest widened considerably. And that came partly because of the advances of technology, literacy, science in the Western world, and the imperial domination that brought over much of Asia, and by the end of the 19th century, all of Africa.
What he's saying here is that what he's trying to say is that the North Atlantic, that is the Western Europeans, they have been dominant. They have been controlling the world since they invented the technology. You know, technology started from there, from Britain, the Industrial Revolution that produced the steam engine and other things. And at that point, they are the only one that have access to the steam engine, have education, have so many things that have them going, that help them to dominate the world and exploiting other people. So those time has passed now, because other continents, other cultures are now catching up. They are catching up. They are also developing. And so that is what Jeffrey Sachs is trying to explain here. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs as he continues to present the information.
Africa. So the West widened its lead, both through its economic and technological advances, but also the brutal age of high imperialism of Europe in the 19th century, and indeed until the middle of the...
So what he's saying here is that the West widened their lead with their development of technology and imperialism. When he says imperialism, it means both slavery, both coming to other people's country, exploiting other people, colonizing other people, and getting a lot of resources from every other part of the world that they colonize. And so they have a lot with them, having been the first to get industrialization and being the best to start imperialism. Imperialism, I want you to understand it, is they left their own country to other countries to kill and take their lands and exploit the people and the resources of those lands that gave them so much surplus that the gap, they were on top of the world for so many years. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Of the 20th century. At the end of World War II, Europe had basically battered itself to death in 2 civil wars in the first half of the 20th century. And that opened the way for the colonized parts of the world to gain their political independence. And that happened, of course, in the late 40s. And
what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is that at the end of World War II, Europe fought themselves just like they are fighting right now. And that war made them, after the Second World War, to lose their grip over so many countries and continents. And then those countries and continents, including Africa, started to gain independence from them because they became weak after fighting themselves in the 1940s. And so that is exactly the same thing that is going on right now, the fight they are fighting in Ukraine. So because they always go to war. So it was after the Second World War that they became weak from all the wars that they are fighting that helped other people other African countries to gain their independence. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
In the 1950s, and then stretched out into the 1970s, and in some cases the 1980s, depending on whether the European powers fought wars to try to keep their colonies or let them go through exhaustion or for other reasons. But in any event, from the second half of the 20th century, countries were independent for the first time, typically in more than 100 years. And what did they do? They began to catch up. First thing they did was engage in education, which the European imperial powers did not offer to most of their subjects.
So what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is, as soon as the second half of the mid of the 20th century, which is from the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and so on and so forth, that all their colonies became independent. So these colonies, when they became independent, started to catch up, and they start to invest in education, of which most of the education that was being provided by the colonial masters to the subjects, to their colonies, were not the correct education. They were being miseducated. They were not being taught what they're supposed to know. And so those countries that became independent were now able to try to educate their people correctly. But we know that educating our people correctly is still very far away in Igbo land or Biafra land and Africa, because a lot of all those colonial information are still being imposed on our people up to today. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Certainly not in any quality that would enable their colonies to achieve economic development. I raise all of this because what is happening.
So what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is that the education that the colonial masters, the Western Europeans, the North Atlantic countries provided to their colonies were substandard, not enough to help them to have economic independence. And so when these colonies now get their freedom, got independence, some of them now try to improve on their educational system. And we are saying at Nkola Mahadum that even after all the improvement up to today, a lot of the information, a lot of the education, a lot of educational materials or curriculum being impacted on Africans are still have colonial content and should be modified. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
What's happened is a normal process where Asia and now Africa and other parts of the non-Western world are achieving economic development by raising educational standards, most fundamental part of economic development, building infrastructure, and in many cases, and China's of course the most notable in the world, moving from catching up to moving forward by becoming great innovators of new technologies on their own. So this is a normal process. It's a healthy process. It's a good process. It's driving the Western world nuts, especially with our nutty government in the United States.
So what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is that by other countries now trying to develop, trying to revamp their educational system and technology and doing well, that the Western Europeans don't like it. They don't like that you are doing well. They want you to continue to remain on the ground for them to remain on the top. That is what they want. They don't like you to get up. They don't like you to have a good life. They don't like you to challenge them. That is what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here. They didn't like it. They don't want you to be successful. So whenever you are trying to do a project and you're bringing them in to help you, they want you to fail. It's better you use your people. Igbo people, use Igbo people. Use Biafran people. Use African people. When you are doing projects in your land, do not involve them because they want you to fail. They don't want you to succeed. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Why? Because the Western world came to believe in its superiority over several centuries. Because when you're ahead, you say, I'm ahead because I'm better. I'm ahead because of the God I believe in. I'm ahead because of some kind of intrinsic superiority, a lot of white supremacy, a lot of religious supremacy. All sorts of reasons have been given in the last 250 years by Europeans and Americans about why they naturally run the world. So
what Jeffrey Sachs again is saying here is that they have this Western superiority. They are superior to everybody else. Why wouldn't they feel so? After all, they left their land to many lands across the world, including Biafra land, and imposed their way of life on our people. Then they imposed their religion, their education, their commerce, their fashion, their music, their governmental structures and system on us, on the people. That's why they are feeling that they are superior to you, because they imposed their way of life on you and you accepted it. And that is why we are advising our people to do away with these foreign colonial cultures in our land, because that makes us feel inferior to them. And they are feeling superior because they believe that, hey, they were able to impose all those things on our people. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs. This is important.
We're at the end of that Western-led world. And truth be told, it's not only the United States that's crazy, it's also Europe. They don't want to give up these advantages because they came to believe, and again, for a lot of reasons, some absolutely vulgar, some mistaken ideas, some sophisticated fallacies. The belief, for example, that Max Weber proposed that it's Protestantism that would be the key for economic success. So even the Catholic regions of Southern Europe would not be able to catch up. All of these reasons led to a mindset that I think is still very much alive in Europe and the US. And
it's not only America that is feeling this, doesn't want to give up. It's not only America. It includes the Western Europeans, which is Britain, France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Italy, all of them don't want to give up these advantages that they have over other people, because they feel that they are different. They feel that they are superior. They feel that you don't have to be on the same table with them. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
An air of superiority, a belief that how dare the Russians threaten us. They're not quite us. They're not quite Europe. And China, my God, the deep antipathy to China is shocking to me. I believe basically it's racism in the end, because it's widely held. It is taken for granted in the United States, especially in the political class, of course. But it's a part of our deep-seated history. Already by the 1880s, there were anti-China laws on Chinese migration. The racism and antipathy has been there for a long time. And now that China really is a rival as innovator in the world, definitely has surpassed the United States in industrial output by quite a large margin.
They don't want you to advance in any form. That even China, they don't like China. They don't like the Chinese people, how they're trying to innovate, how they're trying to be like them. And they have even anti-China laws to prevent the Chinese from migrating, coming to America. So if they have anti-China laws, don't you also know they have anti-African laws? And so they don't want anybody to compete with them. And that's what Jeffrey Sachs called racism. So when you are hearing racism, racism doesn't even start from there. It started when they left their land to other people's land to kill the people and take away their land and resources. That is where racism started. This idea of one race being superior to the other is where racism started. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Margin is the low-cost producer of much of what the world really needs, whether it's zero carbon energy, the new electric vehicles, 5G digital technologies. China's just wonderfully adept, competitive, and innovative. And this is really driving the political class crazy in the United States. How dare they? The insult to the Western dominance. So to my mind, your question is really a question of almost psychology that is not grounded in actual facts about security or threats, but rather is an attitude issue. And if you ask me, what does America First stand for? It stands for America first and dominant. And what Trump exposes every day, by the way, in a cruder and more dangerous way, is his belief that he can post something on Truth Social and the world has to respond to it. And that he can give orders to Putin, or he can give orders to Xi Jinping, or he can give orders to Lula, or he can give orders to the BRICS, and everybody's going to fall in line.
So America still believes that they are controlling the world. That is why Donald Trump is believing that if he posts something on his social media, he's giving everybody an order, giving the Russian leader an order, the Chinese leader, everybody in the world, they are giving them an order. You must do this or not. You must do this or we do this to you. Giving the world an order that they should take it whether they like it or not. That is how they've been treating other cultures, other leaders. But now Trump is trying to make it open by declaring America first. Whatever America says, That's what every other people around the world should do. And that is what we call the unipolar or globalist. The unipolar, one world globalist order. That is what it is. Where if America says one thing, the whole world must comply. That is where they want the world to go to. That is how they've been managing the world until now. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
That's his real belief. It's at a personal level rather crude, but it's kind of in the air in Washington that, oh, yes, multipolar. Marco Rubio says these things once in a while in speeches, but really America is going to tell the world what to do. And what's problematic right now is the rest of the world isn't going to follow the US line. And we have a president that is out of control of law in the United States. He just issues executive decrees. He issues orders every day. The Supreme Court has basically said, we're not going to stop him. Congress has said, we're pathetic. We have nothing to do with this. And so we have one person, nearly an octogenarian, who has delusions of American power, who is giving orders every day to the world. The orders change by the...
Now, the world is not following the order being given by Donald Trump because the world have changed. Because America is losing its influence around the world. And so that is why you see him behaving the way he's behaving sometimes. So let's continue to listen.
By the hour, the rest of the world is, some are trying to say, yes, please, we love you, we respect you, we honor you. But in fact, a lot of the world follows President Lula's line, although President Lula is just about the only one with the gumption to say it. He said last week, we don't want an emperor, period. And he meant it. And when the United States, not the United States, by the way, when Donald Trump responded by saying, okay, Brazil gets 50% tariffs, President Lula said, okay, we have a reciprocity law, we retaliate. We don't want an emperor. This is where we are this week. It's rather shocking. It's rather amazing.
You see, this is American Donald Trump behaving like an emperor. You see all this tariff war that he's fighting. He's fighting this tariff war alone without carrying the other institutions like Congress along. And our question at Nkola Mahadum is, we have won Africans, we have won the Igbo people and Biafrans against practicing this Western democracy. This Western democracy that we are practicing is a failure in Africa. It's even a failure in the land where they found it, in the US, because now it is only Donald Trump that is making the laws. He's one that's using decrees, executive order, decrees without going to Congress. Is this the type of democracy we want to be practicing in Africa? Leaving our own ancestral, the Republican democracy of our ancestors that they gave to us, which depends on the people, on everybody to participate. Instead, what you see now in the Western democracy has been practiced by Donald Trump is authoritarian power. And President Lula told him that we don't want another emperor, that if you give us tariff of 50%, we shall also give you tariff of 50%. As you do to me, so I will do to you. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs. This is very, very, very nice.
It's not, let's live in a multipolar world. let's make peace, let's make business, let's get along. It's more dangerous than that right now. It is an erratic leader that it has no institutional control, who both exemplifies and exacerbates this Western delusion of power over the rest of the world, something that is past. It's already passé. It's already an anachronism. It was true, by the way, for 200 or 250 years, but it ain't true today. And this conflict between the perception and the reality is very dangerous.
The problem that the Westerners have, Donald Trump, Britain, France, and others, is that they are never contented with what they have gotten from the rest of the world, especially from the Igbo people, from the Biafran people, from African people. Since the inception of their coming into Africa and the slavery that followed it, after slavery, we got colonization. After colonization, we have neo-colonization going on right now, where they are using our people, bribing our people, sometimes imposing puppets, and continue to exploit our resources and our people. When are they going to be contented? When are they going to be contented? Yet they are not contented. And they can't even know when to stop. It is time for you to stop. We are calling on you to stop and understand that the world is changing. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Dangerous.
Yeah, no, your analysis is very spot on, and yeah, that would have been a better term to say relative decline. That is, as the rest catches up to the West, and it also appears that this is where a lot of the antagonism is. That it's not that the Russians, Chinese, or Iranians are a threat; it's more a threat to the hegemon. That is, Russia. You know, it's not absurd to say they should have a seat at the table in Europe. China obviously can't be broken just because it's growing too fast, and also Iran deserves a role in the Middle East. But you mentioned Lula, and this is an interesting case, seemingly of the collapse of American cursive language, as you suggest. The fact that they just turn around, and but this is of course in the context of the BRICS summit, so which Trump also sent out a social truth tweet, or what it's called, where he called that this was anti-American policies of BRICS. And on the same day, he also signed and sent all these tariffs letters. I'm not sure if that should symbol something that it's on the same day. But to what extent is the United States capable of slowing down BRICS? Or is this only counterproductive initiative by threatening countries to abandon BRICS?
Listeners should go online and type in BRICS declaration, Rio de Janeiro, to get the actual text of what the BRICS countries said. It's a good reading, a little turgid as these multilateral documents are. But for example, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think the United States is mentioned one time. There's no sense in which the document is anti-US. What is mentioned repeatedly is the United Nations, the international rule of law, multilateralism, a rules-based order, not according to Donald Trump's rules, but according to the rules of the World Trade Organization or the UN Charter or the UN General Assembly or the UN Security Council. That's mentioned repeatedly. The BRICS sign on to the multilateral processes. To call this anti-American is only to reflect the fact that it is the United States that has walked out of multilateralism. The United States walked out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The United States walked out of the World Health Organization. The United States does not pay its dues to the United Nations. The United States said, we oppose the Sustainable Development Goals. In our English cliche, that's like being opposed to motherhood and apple pie. We're opposed to sustainable development, to ending poverty, to fighting climate change. And when I say opposed, I mean the US government is voting against UN resolutions that call.
You have had it. The United States is opposing everything, even BRICS, which stands for unipolar, multilateralism, which means giving everybody equal opportunity to have a voice in the world, to have a voice in taking action. But United States is always opposing to the BRICS. And you know what BRICS is? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These are BRIC nations which are asking for multilateralism, that is unipolar, a multipolar order, multipolar world, a world not centered on United States and City of London. But they're opposed to that. And you have had so many other United Nations organizations that United States is also opposed to. They are opposed to everything because they want to remain on top. They want to maintain the hegemony. The hegemony means the empire. This is what you have to know. That is why we want to use this as our basis for today's lecture. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Call for the Sustainable Development Goals because, as the U.S. spokespeople at the UN say, this is not in America's interest. So when the BRICS come out for the international system, yes, Donald Trump says, oh, that's anti-American, because the United States is absenting itself from the multilateral system. I have to say again and again, though, because
everything is for their own interest. Everything is for American interests. How about the interest of the Igbo man? How about the interest of the Biafran? How about the interest of Africans? How about the interest of other parts of the world? Why should it be only one country's interest that you'll be voting against? Once it's against your interest, you vote against it. You call it anti-American. We want you to understand the world you live in, and hence this lecture. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs. This is very, 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 very important, important lecture.
Because we use these terms as shorthand. When I say the United States, I mean almost literally these days Donald Trump, one person, because Congress doesn't say a word. It's pathetic. As I said, the Supreme Court is basically saying, well, the president can do what he wants. And the American public has no say in anything. The American public supports the United Nations, as one opinion survey after another has demonstrated for decades. So we use shorthands of countries, but what we mean is governments. In most cases, governments are institutionalized. In the United States, of course, there is an institutionalized government. It's the deep state. It's the...
You see, when you trace this Western democracy and how they function, you can see that the American public supports all those things that the American government is voting against in the United Nations. The American public, the people that they are supposed to serve, are not on the same page with them. Why the government led by Donald Trump is on one page, the public is on another page. They are disconnected with their public. The Western democracy is, the leaders are always disconnected with their masses. You can also see that with all the demonstrations being carried out in the United States here, and also in France and other European countries against the war by Israel in Gaza. You can see all the demonstrations that the people have been doing for the government to stop that war in Gaza, yet they are not listening to them. So this type of government is not something we need in Africa, and it's a failure in Africa. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
It's the military-industrial complex which really runs the U.S. government, and it's personalized in a president that doesn't rule by law or by legislation, but rather by executive order. This is even more true than just about any so-called authoritarian country in the world that I know of.
The deep states, when we say the deep states, the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the elites, their elites, and the London, the city of London, and the Wall Street. These are the people that are the one making decisions for the American government, not Trump. The military-industrial complex, those who want to go to war, and the CIA, they are called the deep state. The deep state, they are the one controlling the president, President Trump, not the people. And this is not the type of democracy we will want in Africa. Let's continue to listen.
Where in most countries there's at least a ruling council or some kind of a group of governors of the provinces of the country or some such institution. But in the United States, it's one person right now that decides 50% tariff for Brazil, 30% tariff on this, we tax whatever. The whole international tax system of the United States being determined by one person, announced on social media. Extraordinary what's happening.
And again, this is not just a concern for domestic.
As you can see, the Western democracy is a failure in the countries that founded them. You know that the Western democracy being practiced in America is funded by America, and yet it's a failure because the leaders are disconnected with the masses, with their population. They are disconnected. They are being controlled by what they call the deep states, the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and their oligarchs, their elites in Wall Street. These are the people controlling Donald Trump, and not. That's why he's not doing what the public wants. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs, because this is very, very, very nice interview.
Well, his voters are based, but also for foreign leaders who actually, many people had some hopes that they could reach a deal with Trump based on his rhetoric. But the most recent one of Trump seemingly reversing is with Russia. He now made some statements that Putin isn't a nice guy after all because he hasn't stopped the war and agreed to a ceasefire, which is strange because in the beginning of this presidency, he seemed to recognize there was a need for a political settlement, which included neutrality for Ukraine. But this appears to be out the window, and now Putin is a bad man again, and it appears that Trump is going to go back to Biden's policies, so he's now approving of sending weapons. What do you make of this? Is this simply Trump going back to Biden policies, or do you see this as being a negotiation tactic? How do you make sense of this?
I don't believe this is a tactic. I think that this is a very grave and very dangerous example of what we're experiencing right now. First of all, for a glimmer of a moment, Trump more or less said privately or through some aides in brief statements, yes, NATO enlargement was a bad idea. And it was a provocation that led to this war. And that gave a lot of us, you and I and others, the hope that, okay, now we're getting to the real issue, which is that this war can be stopped by a clear political settlement in which the United States and NATO allies say that NATO will not enlarge to Ukraine.
Now that we are going into Ukraine, we want to give you a background that the government in Ukraine before 2014 was a government that was loyal to Russia. Before they have what they call the Maidan coup. The Maidan coup was sponsored by America to remove that president in 2014 and install another president that will be doing the bidding of the Western Europeans for America and NATO. And so after they installed that president there, that eventually led to Zelensky coming in. So it was in 2014 that the problem in Ukraine actually started. And so remember, when Trump came to office, he said that he will resolve the Ukraine-Russian war within 24 hours. Trump came to office on January 20, 2025. It's been it's about 7 months now that he came to office. And yet, he's still not able to resolve that conflict. And even though he has agreed that it was NATO enlargement towards Eastern Europe, towards trying to enlarge to Ukraine, that actually caused the special military operation of Russia. And so this is the background we want to give you. So he promised to stop this war, but now he's not able. Now he's trying to exacerbate, increase the tempo to put fire more in the war against Russia. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs. Thank you very much.
And to Georgia and to other countries on Russia's borders that all go back to plans of the 1990s to surround Russia with the military force and to render Russia a third-rate power. That was the plan. And actually, speaking.
The plan is to surround Russia with military equipment and infrastructure so that eventually they will attack Russia to exploit all the natural resources of Russia and make Russia a third state in their rating of states. So Russia will move from number 1 to 2 to 3 so that they will be the one deciding what is going on in Russia. So let's continue to watch the interview. Very interesting. And before we continue, please, we want to beg you to join, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, so that anytime we produce a new lecture, you will be the first to get it. Plus, go back to our previous lectures, because all those lectures we have packaged and presented to you, we are packaged and presented from Biafran, from Igbo man, and African perspectives. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Zbigniew Brzezinski laid it out in 1997 in his book, The Grand Chessboard, and he has a chapter explaining, in his view in 1997, Russia will be able to do nothing but accept this. That's the arrogance that I was speaking about earlier. So Trump gave a hint, and apparently his negotiators told the Russians, yes, we understand, we want to reach a political settlement. The U.S. deep state, that's the CIA, the intelligence agencies, the armed services committees of the Congress, the weapons makers and so forth, erupted. How can you accept this? This is weakness and so forth. The Europeans, Starmer and Macron, and it was Scholz then, and then Merz, all said, no, you can't do this. We fight on. We fight on. Rutte, Mark Rutte, who's now the Secretary General of NATO, who is unspeakably childish in his behavior, first of all, calling Trump daddy, but also declaring at the recent NATO summit that Ukraine inevitably will become part of NATO. So that message, which was the glimmer of hope of rationality, of finding a way for peaceful coexistence, to use an old phrase, but meaning staying alive, that has gone out the door.
What Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is that, Trump at first wanted to make peace for Ukraine and Russia to reach a peace deal. But the deep state, which is the military industrial complex, the intelligence agencies, the CIA, said, no, it will make America look weak. And also their Western allies, Germany, Britain, France, all of them say, no, let's fight on. You know why they want to fight on? Because they always like to fight, and they have benefited immensely from wars across the world. Because even before they conquered Africa, they fought a lot of wars. In South Africa, they fought for almost 100 years. In Biafra land, they fought Ekumenic warriors for more than 30 years. And so they've been benefiting from wars. That's why these Europeans want to fight on. So let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Door. And what replaced it was this typical demand: stop fighting, ceasefire. We don't talk about politics. NATO is inevitably going to go to Ukraine, says Mark Rutte, and the United States does nothing to say, no, that's not right. You can't say that. Quite the contrary. President Trump greets NATO Secretary General Rutte in the White House. Everything is lovey-dovey. So there's no politics left, just demands. And Trump says, you stop fighting, ceasefire. And Putin says, no, we said that we need to get to the core of these issues. Oh, you're a bad person. Now we're going to send weapons to hit you deep inside Russia. First of all, it's so unbelievably immature and unbelievably erratic that you couldn't imagine, I couldn't imagine a kind of high school game, being played this way. We're talking about nuclear superpowers. So this is profoundly dangerous, but also reflecting this mindset. Donald Trump says, I told Putin what the answer would be, and he didn't agree. He's a bad man. So Trump calls Zelensky and says, could you hit Moscow? Apparently, this is what the Financial Times.
Yeah, so what he's saying here is that when Russia told the Americans, let's get to the deep roots, deep cause, what is the foundation, the major cause of this war, then Trump said, no, that Putin is a bad man. And now we're going to send weapons to Ukraine that we hit deep into Russia. You see? So when they are treating Russia in this way, who is a superpower, a nuclear superpower, and have a vibrant economy, so if they can treat Russia in this way, imagine how they'll be treating other leaders from other poorer, non-nuclear, non-major military power. Imagine how they'll be treating them if they can be treating Russia in this way. It's very, 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 very important that you think, you use your conviction, you use your common sense to reason, to understand the world that we live in. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
Financial Times is reporting today. Could you hit St. Petersburg? Yeah, we could, Mr. President, because Zelensky's also the epitome of responsibility that will get us all killed in World War III if this man has his way. And this is how the world is right now. It's very bad. And it reflects this extraordinary mix of personalization of global affairs in the United States, the long-standing deep state project, and an arrogance that is absolutely stunning and so large that the Western world, it's not just the United States, it is the US, it is Germany, it is France, it is Britain, and by the way, it's Norway joining in the chorus, and many others, acting as if, yes, of course we run the world. How dare Putin tell us anything? We don't have to talk about anything about politics or political settlements. We just have to say he's a bad man and keep fighting. Wow.
The Europeans believe, the Western Europeans believe they are the one running the world. Remember, when we say Western Europeans, it includes United States, who is their leader, Canada, Britain, France, Belgium, Italy, Portugal, Spain. All of them believe that they are the one running the world. If you raise your voice, they will say, who are you? Even if you are China, even if you are Russia, talk less of we in Africa. We don't have a voice. They believe that they're the one running the world, that you don't have to, they don't want to hear from you. And that is the unipolar, the globalist, NATO world order that the BRICS are fighting against, so that we can have many voices, so that many voices can be given opportunity to be heard than only the voices of the Western Europeans. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs.
I've never seen anything like this, and how dangerous it is.
Yeah, that's my great fear now that not just the Russians, but also the Iranians and Chinese, they more and more see Trump's policies as being just deceptive, and his diplomacy being just theater. And of course, the Europeans following blindly and whitewashing anything that Washington does. It appears that they are also willing now to, forgo some of their hopes of a diplomatic solution with Washington, and preparing to play hardball, which is not a good thing for anyone in the world.
Absolutely. In this nuclear-armed world, this whole approach is so reckless, so dangerous, and if I could say, the Western world needs to open its eyes to reality. It does not run the show. That doesn't make it a loser. The United States has every bit of security any country in the world could dream of. In fact, the U.S. is untouchable from a conventional, in a conventional sense. The only danger to the United States of America, the only security issue to the United States of America is nuclear war. And it seems to be the only path that the U.S. is on right now, which is the most direct antagonism of the other major powers in the world.
So what Jeffrey Sachs is saying here is that when the Western Europeans understand that they don't run the world, that they do not run the world, even in the 21st century, where we are in a nuclear world. Nuclear world means there are countries that have nuclear weapons, that one nuclear weapon can clear everybody in the world. You do not run the world, and that America is protected by virtue of their location. You have to cross the Atlantic Ocean before you get to America. America is protected. So why is this war, and not listening to any other side? Once any other person have different opinion on how to make the world better, the West will say no, led by America. They are being led by America because America is the one that is the big elephant in the room of NATO. Let's continue to listen to Jeffrey Sachs before we bring this lecture to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's listen to him. I think he's coming to an end.
The crudest possible way.
Well, Jeffrey Sachs, thanks so much. I know you're very busy there in Beijing and probably have a full day ahead of you. So thank you for letting.
By the way, lots of meetings that I've been having all over the world, and there's.
This will be the end of the interview as we may have it, because we want to bring this lecture to an end. So you have had it. All the advantages that the Western Europeans have is getting out of their hand because other continents, other cultures are rising since after independence, building the educational system, building their infrastructures. Some of them have nuclear weapons now, and China and others are developing in various ways, and they don't like it. They don't like competition. They don't want any other person to rise, and they don't like it. And they are trying to hold on for every other person in the world to stand still, for them to remain ahead. And that's what Jeffrey Sachs called racism. But we are saying that in Colombo, racism started when they left their land to other people's land to start to kill human beings. And then they also enslaved human beings. And that they continue with colonization and neocolonialism, which has continued up to this day, including enforcing their culture on every other person, in addition to using puppets to make sure that they impose leaders that will be doing their bidding against the wishes of the people. And this interview also revealed that the American government, Trump, is not doing what the American people want. He's being controlled by the deep state, the intelligence agencies, the military industrial complex, the CIA, and others, and Wall Street. That's the people controlling Donald Trump. And we don't want this type of foreign democracy in our land, because it has already failed in their own land, and it has also failed in our own land. The one they are pressing in Africa now, the foreign democracy they are pressing in Africa right now is a failure. And you can also see that it's also a failure in their own land. And with this, we shall be bringing today's lecture to an end. But before we end it, I have to advise you to please, all Africans should stand up and help to dismantle all the artificial colonial boundaries in Africa, because those colonial boundaries are the sources of poverty, exploitation, wars, migration, all the katakata in our land, poverty, and so on and so forth. Dismantle it, because if we Africans cannot go to Europe and say, you are one country, you are one country, how long should we continue to deal with these colonial boundaries? And with this, we shall bring today's lecture to an end. Thank you very much for joining us. And also, tomorrow, we shall be doing another lecture. So also join us, go back to our previous lectures, and you will enjoy all the lectures we have packaged and presented to you from Igbo man, Biafran, and African perspectives. And with this, we shall bring today's lecture to an end. Thank you very much for joining me, and have a very, very good day. Thank you.